the attribute that makes us moral, that makes human beings moral, is that we have a capacity for self-correction. So, if I behave in a wrong way, in a harmful way, or a dishonest way in a situation, I have the capacity to recognize that I do that. As a human being, I am an animal gifted with a superior intelligence to other animals. Other animals don't need to know about right and wrong because they operate by clear instinctual programs. But human beings have a great latitude in their behavior. And so self-correction is tremendously important. Whether or not you believe in karma, you can practice self-correction. And if you do practice self-correction, you will recognize what a powerful practice it is. Because when you realize that you have done some wrong to someone, or treated them badly, or unfairly, or dishonestly, first, the fact that you can realize and admit that is a tremendous attribute of our species. And secondly, that you could go to that person and ask to make amends and correct yourself in that situation is a tremendous attribute to our species. And this is pure and simply the basis of pagan and Gnostic morality, self-correction.
What I'm kind of meant to say is this is kind of a little bit of a glimmer of light that I'm seeing in the world as far as people actually starting to wake up and to start to own their own actions and their own decisions instead of laying it all at the feet of the church. Just go say 10 Hail Marys and walk away a free man.
Yeah, well, that, of course, confession was one of the greatest cons of all time. And it earned a fortune for the church. It paid off for everyone. It earned a fortune for the church. It allowed the perpetrators to turn around and go repeat their ills and their evils over and over again because they knew they would be forgiven for them in confession. So no wonder that, the mafia are Catholics. It works perfectly for both sides,
I have a question, not to go too off topic, but do you find any connections between the Gnostics and early Druidism?
You mean the Druids?
Early Druids? Yes.
Oh, sure. The Druids were Gnostics, and the Gnostics were Druids. I mean, it's almost the same. It's just a general term, Gnostic is not something. It's not a label of a very narrow and specific definition. It means a shaman, seer, someone who knows the deeper things, the deeper secrets of reality. I point out in my book that in Hypatia's time in Alexandria, there was actually a kind of study group who were dedicated to the lore of the Druids. They may think this is pretty wild because Druids come from the British Isles, and that's a long way from Alexandria in Egypt, isn't it? But nevertheless, Druids certainly traveled to Alexandria. They were great astronomers, as were the Egyptians. A Druid from the British Isles would have been able to discuss astronomy and the planets and the cycles of the planets and the cycles of the Earth with an Egyptian astronomer in a temple in Luxor or in Memphis. This was typical of the university system of knowledge sharing or open source spirituality in the mysteries. So there's no question that the Druids were part of this network. They remained Druids in their British character, or their Irish or Scottish character, because in each place where a cell of the mystery schools was established, it rooted itself very closely to the regional characteristics of that area. So Druidism is a Gnostic spiritual practice that has the regional characteristics of the British Isles and Wales and Scotland and Ireland, where it emerged. But when you go down to the fundamental principles, Druids would have seen eye to eye with Gnostics from Alexandria. And in fact, they did have direct contact with each other. This is known.
The reason why I brought that up was because in not too far from where you are in Basque country, it's always said that their language is made up of Gaelic and Spanish,
Hmm.
and that the Druids did spend a lot of time there. That's why I brought that up because I was wondering if they ever. Um,
Well, I'll tell you, there is a dolmen that's I call the secret dolmen, and there's a picture of me sitting in it on metahistory.org. If you go to the homepage and then you click on Site Author, you'll see me sitting in this dolmen. I call it the secret dolmen. It's at a place called Punta de Grazia. I was shown this dolmen a few years ago. It's not on any map. It hasn't been plotted yet. It's identical with the Druidic dolmens that I have seen in Ireland and Scotland. There's absolutely no question. It's the same technology, and it's perfectly aligned to the sun, to the setting of the sun at the winter solstice, as many Druidic monuments were. So the Druids traveled all around. You know, they were polylinguists, polymaths. They did not have a written language of their own, but they spoke other languages. A Druid would typically speak 5 or 6 other languages. Uh, Again, when we go into the history of the mystery schools and pre-Christian Europe, we find that there was a tremendous network of close organization and cooperation between the spiritual teachers of that period, which was all destroyed intentionally.
Completely. So the other question I was gonna ask you, how can we make this connection to this sp spirit that we call the Earth spirit, the Sophia spirit?
Right,
How can people make a connection?
right. Very good question. Uh, I use like to pronounce this word Sophia because Sophia is generally what you call a woman's name, and Sophia kind of distinguishes it as being a little different. Sophia is a Greek word that means wisdom. So the word philosophy means philosophia, means the love of wisdom. And in my book, Not in His Image, I show that the entire Gnostic movement of the mystery schools of ancient Europe was focused on a particular myth. Technically, we would call this a directive myth. A directive myth is the myth that directs or guides a group of people or a culture. For instance, the myth of the Bible, the creation of Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden, the fall of Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden, and all of that you find in the Old Testament is the directive myth of Judaism and Christianity. Well, the Gnostic movement had its own directive myth, and that is called the myth of the fallen goddess Sophia. And what I have done in my book, Not in His Image, is to reconstruct and restore this myth. It is the most remarkable myth that I have ever encountered in my whole life of studying mythology. And it is basically a story about our planet. This myth is not a fiction, not a fabrication, not a lie. You have to put aside that idea about myth that many people have. A myth is simply a poetic or metaphorical story that encodes certain information. That is what a myth is. And this myth of the divine Sophia encodes some pretty interesting information. First of all, it explains the origin of the human species. Second of all, it explains the creation of our planet, the special and rather unusual conditions in which the planet Earth was formed and incorporated into a planetary system. It explains the divine endowment of our species, the spark of divine intelligence, or nous. It explains the existence of alien ET-type predators in the solar system and their relationship to humanity, and more. It is a fantastic myth. I have not seen anything comparable to it in any of the world mythologies that I've studied all my life. You might ask, first of all, I'll get to the answer to your question in a moment, more direct answer, but I would like to say first, you might ask, well, if this myth of the divine Sophia is so fantastic, how come I haven't heard about it? Because in fact, if you go to the bookstores and you buy a book on mythology, an anthology of mythology, for instance, there are many of them that exist, the Larousse Encyclopedia of Mythology, you can go through pages and pages. It will give you the creation myths and the stories from Japan, China, Polynesia, Greece, Rome, the Nordic myths, the American Indian myths. Why don't you find the myth of the divine Sophia in this collection? You won't find it there. Reason why is because it was almost totally destroyed. And I am the only scholar of Gnostic and pagan traditions who has actually recovered and restored this myth and put it together again into a coherent storyline. That is the fallen goddess scenario, the myth of the divine Sophia in my book. So the first thing that we need to, the first thing that you can understand about this myth is that it is the story not only of the origin of our species, which you've never heard before, but also of the divine nature of the planet Earth. In the Gnostic view, in the illumined wisdom of those ancient seers, they saw the presence of a divine being in the earth. They did not appeal to some invisible off-planet Father God who looks down at us with spyglasses and observes everything we do and judges whether we behave according to his rules or not. They completely rejected that idea as delusional. They said, look at nature, look at what is right in front of your eyes, look at this earth. This earth is a divine being. It is the embodiment of the goddess Sophia. So the first thing to do to connect with this Gnostic vision experience is to recognize that we are standing and living in the presence of a divine being, which is the planet itself, that is alive and intelligent. The second thing is to recognize that we can be interactive with the divine presence of the planet Earth. We can actually interact and communicate with it consciously, as Gnostics did. In order to bring ourselves to this fantastic possibility of experience, the first step is to know the story, to know the myth. I pointed out in several talks that I've given that when you love someone, think of it as your mother, your brother, your child, your wife, your girlfriend, your boyfriend. When you love another human being profoundly, you know their story of their life. Part of loving someone is to know their story of their life as well as you know your own, and to hold the story of that person's life as a sacred possession of your heart. When I think of the people that I've loved in my life, some of whom are gone and some of whom are still here, I know their life story just as well as I know my own. The beginning is to know and love her story. To know and love the story of the Earth Goddess is the beginning of the Gnostic way. Today.
Okay, John, I'm going to break in here because we're about out of our hour time on our BBS broadcast, but we're going to continue this in our archives on conscious-tv.com. So I just want to remind everybody that condemnation without investigation is the height of ignorance, and join us for the rest of this amazing interview on our website. Hope you all make it there. Ramon?
Thank you very much. And once again, the website is www.conscious-tv.com.